In over 25 years of Fallout lore, we haven't learned very much about Vault-Tec. We've learned enough to know that they're awful. We've explored their vaults enough to see their insidious experiments, and we've seen what these experiments have done to human lives, how they've destroyed families and entire societies. But there's one thing that we've never known. Why? Why experiment on people after the bombs drop? Who's following the experiments after the bombs drop? What benefit would Vault-Tec get from these experiments after the bombs drop? The Fallout show has given us answers where the games have not. And that's why this video is chock full of spoilers, including end-of-series spoilers. So if you want to avoid spoilers, turn back now. One of the first new things we learn about Vault-Tec is the origin of the Vault Boy. Cooper Howard was a famous actor before the bombs dropped. He primarily played in westerns. And while his friends and co-stars all around him were being fired by the studio for being too communist,
Bob's been fired, Coop.
What?
See, it turns out Bob's a bit of a communist.
Communist?
he embraced capitalism. He embraced a sponsor.
Well, this is America. Everybody has a sponsor, and I'm not ashamed to earn a living.
But you, my friend, you know which way the wind is blowing. And it's that. A world run by people who wear pocket protectors to a pool party.
Partly because he believed in capitalism, he believed in America.
That's about all the horseshit I can take. I have my principles, Miss Williams. That's all.
He was in the military. He fought in Operation Anchorage against the Reds.
I wore the T-45 when we almost lost the great state of Alaska to the Reds.
I've even got your friend, Charlie Whiteknife.
Are you kidding me, Charlie? I served with that guy.
But also because he wanted to avoid losing his job. And primarily because his wife, who worked at Vault-Tec, wanted him to. He agreed to be the face of Vault-Tec's vaults as a favor to his wife.
On behalf of the whole Vault-Tec family, we wanted to say how delighted we are that Barb could use her connections to get to you.
You know, I've never done an advertisement before in my life. But then again, my wife has never asked me to. The things I'm willing to do for you never cease to amaze me.
Cooper Howard puts on a suit that his wife gives him. It's in his favorite colors, the colors of his sheriff outfit from a movie that he was working on, blue and gold.
A bit of a costume change for you, Mr. Howard.
They even made it in your color.
He goes to the shoot where everyone recognizes him. They love that he's there, and then he has an idea.
Hey, I have an idea. What if I were to do like a thumbs up?
Go for it, Coop.
Cooper Howard was the origin of the Vault Boy's thumb up. It was just an idea he had on one day during a photo shoot that Vault-Tec rolled with, and it became sort of an icon of the Vault-Tec Corporation. Coop went on to star in many more commercials for Vault-Tec, notably exploring Vault 4 and telling the American public exactly what to expect in a Vault-Tec vault.
Now that right there is Vault 4's 3-foot thick lead casing, strong enough to keep out the rads and the reds.
He became so synonymous with Vault-Tec that many co-stars and actor friends who despised Vault-Tec began to distance themselves from him.
I think Hollywood actor friends, they want to be seen celebrating with the pitch man for the end of the world.
He managed to avoid being a victim to the Red Scare for a while, but he became a pariah amongst the people who hated what Vault-Tec was. And then the reverse of the Red Scare happened to him. Instead of losing work because he was too communist, he began to lose work because he was too capitalist. His co-stars refused to go on set if he was present.
You hear I lost a movie over these ads? The actors wouldn't come out of their trailers. Lonnie Lewis said it was on moral grounds.
Vault-Tec's the devil, man.
My wife works there.
At some point, Coop's star falls. And we can infer from the end of the show that after Coop learns what Vault-Tec is planning, he objected to being the face of Vault-Tec, which is why we see billboards that had old Vault-Tec advertisements with Cooper Howard's face plastered over with new Vault-Tec advertisements, now with the cartoonish Vault Boy, but still using Cooper Howard's signature thumbs up. It's possible that after he learned what he learned, he objected to what Vault-Tec was doing and was branded a communist.
Pinko.
Yeah, he still took my money.
And he and his wife divorced.
Why the hell is Cooper Howard working kids' birthday parties?
What else? Alimony.
But he would do anything to provide for his family. He wasn't too proud to perform as entertainment for children's parties if it meant he could give his daughter a good day. But at this point in his life, he wouldn't do his famous signature thumbs up.
Oh, Coop. Do your thumbs up.
Yeah, given the state of everything, I prefer not to if that's all right.
Why not? That's what you're famous for.
Why wouldn't you do it? The thumbs up.
That's grown-up stuff.
Because now it had a very personal meaning for him. So that's the origin of the Vault Boy, a mascot that Vault-Tec used to put a friendly face on their unscrupulous company. We finally learned their motivations, their true objectives, towards the end of the series. We meet Bud Askins, who oversees the Southern California operations of Vault-Tec.
Bud Askins, I oversee the Southern California operations.
He calls a meeting with some of the heads of the major organizations in the Fallout universe: Robco Industries, Repcon, West-Tec, and Big Mountain. And we at last learned why all of Vault-Tec's vaults had such insidious experiments.
We're here to offer you an opportunity. We'd like to collaborate on some of our vaults.
Because it was the spirit of competition that made our companies great. We have over 100 vaults spread across America. Enough for each of you to claim several. Play out your own ideas for how to create the perfect conditions for humanity. Whatever you want to do, no one needs to know. And may the best idea win.
The purpose of these experiments was so that these companies could create the perfect conditions for humanity. Vault-Tec believed that the world we have of politics and violence is what happens when the world is allowed to rule itself, to organize itself into sometimes conflicting societies and cultures.
This is our chance to make war obsolete. In our current societal configuration, which took shape without intentional guidance, we have friction and we have war. And war, well, war never changes.
But Vault-Tec believed that they could eliminate famine and war and violence if they created a society with intentional guidance. A society that didn't grow on its own, that didn't come about from barter and trade and handshakes and agreements and profits and loss. A society that was ordered with a vision in mind. Their vision. And they have their own idea.
Bud here has an idea for 3 interconnected vaults.
Bud Askins was running his own experiment, using 3 interconnected vaults. But they recognized that they may not have the best idea, and in the spirit of competition, in order to find the best way to direct the organization of human society, they brought in their competition. They offered some of their vaults to their competition and gave them free rein to run any kind of experiment they wanted. That's why the vaults had such awful experiments. It was for the sake of humanity. They thought they were doing the world a favor. They thought they could get rid of war if only they had the right environment, and the right experiment, and the right overseer, the right direction. We don't know the specifics about the experiments that the companies represented at this table ultimately undertook in the vaults, aside from the vaults that we've explored from the games. But the show does give us the details of Vault-Tec's experiment. Their experiment to connect 3 vaults, Vaults 31, 32, and 33. Vaults 32 and Vaults 33 were filled with normal people. There wasn't any horrible experiment going on in those 2 vaults.
What was the experiment in 33?
Well, there is no experiment.
At least, not on the surface. But Vault 31 wasn't open to the public. You couldn't buy a spot in Vault 31. Bud had different plans for it. Bud believed that people couldn't solve their problems for themselves. These problems needed to be solved by good management.
The future of all humanity comes down to one word.
Yeah, what's that?
Management.
And in his worldview, Vault-Tec has the best management. The only problem is that good managers die. They're mortal. They're not robots, they're not machines. They eventually die, and then all of that training, turning them into the perfect manager, goes away, and you have to start all over. What a bummer.
The basic idea is that the biggest obstacle to achievement has been the brevity of the human lifespan. It's prevented us from working on projects that require centuries, maybe even millennia to see through.
All those resources Vault-Tec invests in their management, lost when someone dies or retires. That's worse than any loss they could get from competition. But if you could remove the time factor, maybe use it to your advantage, then it's no longer an enemy to productivity. It's now your greatest weapon. If you can leverage time and your competition can't, then you can outlive your competition.
And most people think scale means increasing global market share. That's thinking in 3 dimensions, and I'm talking about 4. Because what is the ultimate weapon to destroy your competition? It's not outselling them. It's not outsmarting them. It's time. Time is the ultimate weapon.
So what's the best way to preserve humanity? Preserve good management.
I don't have kids myself, but I do have a training program for up-and-coming executives, and that's basically the same thing. Well, I call it Buds Buds. So ideally, Buds Buds will keep my project on track centuries into the future.
These are Buds Buds. My Buds. A well-trained staff of highly supervised junior executives for my own assistant training program. Because the future of humanity comes down to one word: management.
Vault 31 was filled with Buds Buds, cryogenically frozen. Before the bombs dropped, each and every one of these cryopods was filled with a Vault-Tec executive.
America outsourced the survival of this country to the private sector, but it would have been insane to keep a failed nation alive, so we kept Vault-Tec alive instead.
We eventually see a list of names of the executives that were cryogenically frozen in Vault 31. They include Betty, who was Bud's assistant before the war.
Everything all right, Mr. Howard?
Fine. I'm fine, Betty.
And Betty was unfrozen to become an overseer of Vault 33.
I just feel that in times of crisis, you need someone with experience. Betty's already been overseer once.
This list includes Henry, or Hank. The show doesn't explain exactly why Henry was sent to Vault 33 when Betty was already there. Presumably it's because it was time for somebody to get married. And Vault-Tec couldn't control that. All they could control is that when someone was ready to get married, when the vaults were ready to swap populations, they could sweep in and put in an executive from Vault 31. Perhaps that's what they did, taking advantage of an opportunity which gave Vault 33 not 1, not 2, but 3 members from Vault 31. 3 of Buds Buds. Because Steph was from Vault 31 too.
Steph? How's Vault 31 different from here?
What did your dad tell you?
Not much, actually. That's why I'm asking.
Gee, I don't know. Maybe the mashed potatoes were a little better?
That is what my dad used to say.
Must be true then.
It must be true.
We see her name on the list. She was released after Hank. Bud Askins had Vault 33 filled with Vault-Tec executives just in case. What's interesting is the names we don't see on this list. We don't see Moldaver's name on this list, or Williams as she was known before the war, which of course makes sense because she wasn't a Vault-Tec executive despite the fact that her companies had been taken over by Vault-Tec.
Infinite energy. That's what I was on the verge of achieving when Vault-Tec swept in and bought up every company I'd ever worked for.
Her name's not on the list, which means that she must have been cryogenically frozen some other way. But she dies before the show can explain to us exactly how she's here 200 years after we see her before the bombs drop. Also notably, Cooper Howard's wife and child are not on this list. Barb Howard was his wife, Janie Howard was his daughter, and their names aren't on this list. That was the entire reason Barb was working at Vault-Tec to begin with, to make sure her family got into this vault.
I need this job, Coop. It guarantees us a spot in the vault.
We've got money. We can buy a spot in the vault.
One of the good vaults.
I have worked hard to make sure we go into
a special vault for management, where we will oversee all of the other vaults.
But they're not here, and we don't know why. It's possible that they were never here to begin with, because she said that she was trying to get their family into a vault that oversaw all of the other vaults. But Vault 31 only oversaw Vault 32 and Vault 33 as part of the Buds program. Maybe she was referring to a different vault entirely. Now, it is possible that they could be here just under a different name. And if that's true, I suppose the same could be said for Moldaver. We also know that this list is incomplete. When Norm was snooping in the Overseer terminal, he saw a list of names of people from Vault 31 who had been elected Overseer of Vault 33 in the past. We even get the dates of when they served as Overseer of Vault 33. But none of those names, with the exception of Hank and Betty, appear on this list. Perhaps this means that people who have been reactivated and have since died from old age, they've served their purpose, are removed from this list. Perhaps the reactivated list on the left are only people who have been reactivated and are still alive. And if that's the case, then it's possible that we don't see Barb, Janie, or Williams on this list because they were reactivated, and as far as Vault 31 is concerned, they're dead. So the list brings up a few questions, but nothing that can't be answered in a second season. The residents of Vault 32 and Vault 33 were breeding stock.
They're our breeding pool, genetically selected to breed with my buds to create a class of super managers. People with positivity, people who make lemonade, people who will inherit the earth.
Over time, Vault-Tec would unthaw an executive from Vault 31. That executive would then integrate into the societies of Vault 32 and 33. And then, when there was an election for Overseer, some strings were pulled to ensure that someone from Vault 31 always won the election.
You don't think it's weird that we always elect an Overseer from Vault 31? They did the same exact thing in Vault 32.
Honestly, no. You know, they got that phrase.
When things look glum, vote 31.
When things look glum, vote for somebody from Vault 31.
Now, the show doesn't explain to us exactly how this happened. We can presume that the votes were tampered with by none other than the Overseer of Vault 31, Bud Askins. Bud Askins didn't cryogenically freeze himself. Instead, he put his brain in a jar to manage Vault 31 forever. But when we find him 200 years later, he's stuck.
Nope. Just maybe I have to... Thank you, Betty.
He's gibbering to himself. He seems a little crazy.
In a great game of the... All right.
Which harkens back to what we learned during the Old World Blues DLC for Fallout New Vegas. In that DLC, we meet Old World scientists. Scientists from the Big Mountain Research Facility who existed before the bombs dropped. They prolong their lives by placing their brains in jars. But the fluid that they encase their brains with deteriorates their minds over time. Which is why, 200 years after the apocalypse, those brains in jars spoke gibberish.
This lobotomite is the repository of the brain we sent the signal to. The skin envelope once containing it. Just look at it. The way it blinks. It's like a big, hairless teddy bear.
I know what it is, Dollar. I want to know why it's down here. With its limbs all over everything. And are those penises I see wriggling on its feet? Disgusting.
I believe those are toes, Dr. Klein.
Which is why, 200 years after the apocalypse, Bud Askins speaks gibberish.
This one's it. I'll get it this time.
But he wasn't quite insane. In a similar way that the scientists at Big Mountain were still coherent enough to perform awful surgeries on people, Bud Askins was still coherent enough to pull the strings when it was voting time in Vaults 32 and 33 to make sure that someone from Vault 31, one of Bud's buds, always became an overseer. In this way, the populations that survive the nuclear apocalypse are governed by good management. And when an overseer dies, he's replaced by another person from Vault 31, another one of Bud's buds, ensuring that over the centuries, this exceptional management produces exceptional people and the perfect human society. But it didn't work out the way that Bud and Vault-Tec had planned in Vault 32. Somehow, the people of Vault 32 figured out what was going on. They realized that their only purpose was to be breeding stock for the executives in Vault 31, which is why we see the carnage that we do in Vault 32. These people all committed suicide, but not before they murdered their overseer. Most of the bodies we find in Vault 32 are clearly examples of suicide. They hung themselves up. They put forks in toasters. And when some people weren't willing to commit suicide, they were murdered. The overseer of Vault 32, who is an executive from Vault 31, was murdered in his overseer chair, a cord wrapped around his neck. They wrote "Death to Management" on the walls in his blood, and then the rest of the vault destroyed itself. They would rather die than let Vault 31 continue to experiment on them. I'm a little surprised that Bud didn't find out what happened to Vault 32. 2 years had gone by before the people from Vault 33 discovered what happened in Vault 32.
The last biosignal detected was 2 years ago.
You'd think that Bud would begin to wonder when he never hears from the overseer in Vault 32. But perhaps he never conceived that something like this could happen. After all, these people were governed by good management. But what then? So what if Vault-Tec is able to produce the perfect society in one of their vaults? So what if West-Tec is able to produce the perfect society with one of their experiments? What good is that society underground? None. Which is why we learn in the biggest bombshell of the series that the best way to ensure an orderly society without war is
by dropping the bomb ourselves.
Harrowingly, no one in that room objected. None of those CEOs and powerful people of the current world seem to have a problem with Vault-Tec proposing the destruction of the world. If they did, they didn't show it to us during the series. We get the impression from Fallout New Vegas, after talking with Mr. House, that he didn't really know when the bombs would drop. He didn't know the exact date, which is why he got caught with his pants down when the bombs dropped and he didn't yet have the platinum chip.
That's where the chip was printed, on October 22nd, 2077. It was to have been hand-delivered to me here at the Lucky 38 the next day. But the bombs fell first.
And yet here he was in this meeting. Maybe he objected to the end of the world by Vault-Tec. Maybe he didn't. That's something I hope the showrunners explain in a second season. Additionally, we don't really know if Vault-Tec did what they proposed here. After all, they were simply positing in this meeting that they destroy the world with nuclear bombs in order to do their experiments. Bud tells us that the executives in 31 are to be reactivated once they've wiped the surface clean.
People who will inherit the Earth after we've wiped the surface clean.
We wiped the surface clean.
But he's just telling us their purpose. He's not directly claiming to have wiped the surface clean, and the series doesn't give us any concrete evidence that they did. We don't see anybody pushing the button. We don't hear anyone from Vault-Tec say that they dropped the bombs on October 23rd, 2077. We're inferring that from this conversation and from what Moldaver tells us about Vault-Tec. And yet we do know that Vault-Tec dropped a bomb on Shady Sands, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So if they had the ability to drop bombs on Shady Sands 200 years after the apocalypse, they clearly had the ability to do it in 2077. So for the duration of this video, we'll presume that they actually did drop the bombs that ended the world. But their motives are clear.
A nuclear event would be a tragedy, but also an opportunity. Perhaps the greatest opportunity in history, because when we are the only ones left, there will be no one to fight. A true monopoly.
They wanted to destroy the world to get a monopoly on humanity. In their minds, only by destroying the world could they put an end to war. Only by destroying the world could they make it a better place.
A good bad guy doesn't see themselves as a bad guy.
Their solution to war was to begin again. A solution that isn't unique to them. After all, it was Ulysses' solution to problems in the Mojave. Since the Legion wasn't perfect, and since the NCR wasn't perfect, his solution was to bomb them both and let society begin again.
I'll start with the West. Let that burn. Then, if the East falters after, I'll bring the divide there as well. Burn away the flags. Begin again.
Of course, the problem to that solution is that there's no way for Ulysses to guarantee that whatever grows from the ashes of the Legion or the NCR would be better than those two societies that he destroyed. He has no control over what comes after. Vault-Tec tried to have control over what would come after by controlling the populations of the people who survived the apocalypse. But what they didn't count on was that people who didn't get into a vault would not only survive, but thrive.
What if people are still alive on the surface?
That isn't an issue. Our vaults have the resources to survive for centuries. Meanwhile, our competitors, every other human who isn't us, will be dead on the surface.
That was the great horror that Hank McClane discovered when he tracked his wife down to Shady Sands. Here he found a society, the New California Republic. It wasn't ruled by Vault-Tec, and yet it's thriving. What he didn't know is that Shady Sands itself was founded by survivors from Vault 15. What he didn't know is that survivors from Vault 8 had already used their Garden of Eden creation kit to create Vault City, a thriving society by the events of Fallout 2 and a still existing society by the events of Fallout New Vegas. We don't know its canonical ending, but one of them is that it was absorbed by the NCR. So it's possible that at this time, Vault City was part of NCR, which if true would mean that by destroying Shady Sands, Hank from Vault-Tec was definitely destroying the descendants of people from Vault 15 and possibly destroying the descendants of people from Vault 8.
That's how Vault-Tec deals with competition, just like they did 200 years ago.
But of course, how could he know that? He's been in a vault for 200 years, most of which he spent cryogenically frozen. And I think more to the point, those vaults weren't part of Bud Askin's experiment. They weren't managed vaults. Perhaps Vault-Tec had this experiment with managers from Vault 31 overseeing Vault 33 and Vault 32, and also they equipped some vaults with the GEC, the Garden of Eden creation kit. But maybe Hank didn't know that, and due to his ignorance, he destroyed one of Vault-Tec's experiments that worked. But then again, maybe from Vault-Tec's perspective, it didn't work, because after all, the NCR was at war or had been at war recently, had won and lost multiple wars. If the entire point was to eliminate war, then even though these societies thrived, they could still be considered failed experiments, which is why Hank and Betty destroyed Shady Sands.
Betty, when my mother died, what happened to her Pip-Boy?
It was buried with her.
How are you so sure?
Because I buried her myself. Me and your father.
It's terrifying to think that even 200 years after the apocalypse, Vault-Tec, or the survivors of Vault-Tec, the people from Vault 31, and Bud Askins in this jar still have their fingers on the red button, still have control over America's nuclear stockpile. How did they get their hands on America's nuclear bombs? The show doesn't rightly explain to us. We do know that Vault-Tec was incredibly powerful before the bombs dropped. The show tries to give us the impression that it was even more powerful than the US government.
Right.
Vault-Tec is a $1 trillion company that owns half of everything. And after 10 years of war, the U.S. government is broker than a joke. The cattle ranchers are in charge, Coop.
It's not out of the question that they could have access to America's nuclear stockpile. Perhaps they simply hacked into America's defenses. Or perhaps America had a contract with Vault-Tec and stored some of their nukes in silos owned and managed by Vault-Tec. We don't know. It's not explained. But it's not outside of the realm of possibility that Vault-Tec had access to America's nukes, that Vault-Tec still controls these nukes. In the final scenes of the show, we see Hank McClane walking to the ruins of New Vegas. We know that that's where Mr. House is, assuming he's still alive after the events of 2281. In a pan-out of New Vegas, we see that it's in ruin. We see a ruined NCR vertibird and ruined House Securitrons in the streets of New Vegas. Something awful went down there. But Mr. House was a participant in the great game. We saw him at that round table in Vault-Tec headquarters. Why is Hank McClane going to New Vegas? Does he want to speak with Mr. House? If so, why does he want to speak with Vault-Tec's competition? These are the questions that the series leaves us with that I hope they'll answer during Season 2. And so, that is the canonical story of Vault-Tec and the Great War. Vault-Tec dropped the bombs of 2077. On one hand, it's an intriguing plot, but it's similar to the treatment of a proposed Fallout movie that was never green-lit. This treatment was written by Brent Friedman for Interplay after Fallout 1 was released and before Fallout 2 was released. It was never turned into a movie script, and of course the movie was never made, but in this treatment we learn that the guy in charge of Vault-Tec dropped the first bomb, which triggered a chain reaction causing China and America to launch their nukes, destroying the world. I had kind of hoped that they would have kept Vault-Tec focused on the experiments in the vaults, rather than turning them into an organization that cares about ending war and saving humanity, even if they do so in truly awful Vault-Tec ways. And yet I can't argue that it's a compelling story, and it closes the book on many of the questions this fanbase has had for years. I'm currently producing more videos about the Fallout show. If you don't want to miss my next one, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. If you have already but you feel like you're missing out on YouTube notifications, consider following me on Twitter at Oxhorn. I update Twitter manually with every new piece of content that I publish. I have a plush for sale, but I've got limited quantities and I'm almost sold out. When they're gone, and if you don't want to miss out, snag one today. I've also got a merch shop with completely unique designs that you can't find anywhere else. My designs come on shirts in a variety of men's, women's, and children's sizes, and in a wide array of colors. They come on other products as well, like smartphone cases, pillows, posters, mugs, stickers, prints, etc. So if interested, you can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in another way, consider becoming a patron on Patreon or a member here on YouTube. YouTube members get little badges that appear next to their names in the comment sections of my videos, and access to Ox emojis that they can use in my video comments and in the live chats of my live streams. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with even more Fallout videos.
Wait, cash is tight, so I'm gonna take part in hopefully my last thesis project in the Sim Vault. This kid seems fine, and his experiment is about food, so I get to eat well, at least.